Good morning from Mexico. I'm happy to welcome you to our webinar about the Mexican aviation sector. With me is Mr. Xavier Hurtado, Director for Supplier Development at the Mexican Federacion of the Aerospace Industry, short FEMIA. Before Xavier gives you more details about the Mexican aerospace industry, I would like to give you some useful information about this webinar. This webinar is being recorded. We will send you the link via email a few days after the webinar, together with the presentation. You can use the chat window during the whole webinar to ask questions. We have planned time for answering those questions at the end of the webinar. In case we cannot answer some of the questions right away, we will contact you via email during the days after. Now I pass over to Xavier, who will give you an overview about the Mexican aerospace industry.
Thank you, Martha, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. And let's get started about our presentation. This presentation is called Business Opportunities for Aerospace Suppliers in Mexico. And briefly, let me explain who we are. We are the Mexican Federation of the Aerospace Industry, which is basically an association that gathers the manufacturers of the industry. This means that only the members that manufacture something that flies or that apply a process to the part that flies can be our members. A rough estimate, around 80% of our exports happen to be within our membership. We have a little over 110 members. We have a little over 10 years now, and we have presence in 13 states. We are the private counterpart of the federal government, private nonprofit. And as you can see on the screen, those are a few of the alliances that we have with other associations of different countries. Now, moving on, basically this is how we are structured. These are different committees that we have. But basically, what I'm trying to show you is how we came up with this program. Basically, two of the committees are in charge of the supply chain integration, and one of it goes outside of Mexico to look for those suppliers that happen to be a gap. This program started back in 2016. As you can see on the screen, there are three stages. Stage number one, what we did, we went to aerospace buyers, and we were able to gather $634 million a year from 45 buyer companies. This is the demand. We'll see it later on. The second stage was basically to look for suppliers in Mexico. Basically what we did in conjunction with another organization, we went around the country and we already assessed around 450 suppliers in 17 categories. You will see that table as well. The most important part was that we were able to categorize those suppliers in 5 different maturity levels. And based on that, we can determine whether they're ready or not to be connected to our buyers. We'll disclose that later on. And stage number 3 happens to be inclined towards supply chain integration. And basically over here, this is when we start to determine the gap analysis between what the buyer needs versus where the supplier happens to be at, and then the very tailored program as to how do we take them from one point to the other, including all the process from doing the quotation and first articles and so on. So those are the three main stages, but let's go over them. In this slide, basically what we're trying to show is the forecast that we have in commercial aviation. Obviously, there's military, there's helicopter, and there's also civil aviation. But we decided to focus on the commercial aviation sector, especially because of the demand. As you can see on the screen, and I'm sure you've seen already in different presentations around the world, there's a demand of more than 41,000 aircraft internationally, out of which 90% happen to be aircraft of Boeing and Airbus. Mainly single-aisle aircraft, and basically Boeing and Airbus have been trying to accelerate the production rate of aerospace parts throughout the world. This basically is very important because it shows the opportunity that there wasn't about 10 years ago or even earlier. So this demand basically is pushing buyers to look for suppliers in different regions, and what they want is to find a competitive cost a total landed cost very, very competitive. We'll go to see what that is. So our value proposition when we started this program, basically we said we're going to help buyers to find and filter suppliers, and we'll give you examples briefly about that. We had to develop a pre-audit, and this was basically because back in 2016 we were able to connect 32 suppliers with buyers from tiers 1, and they said, instead of just bringing them to a B2B meeting, prepare them before, make sure that they're ready. So we didn't know what ready was. We thought a lot of suppliers were ready, even foreign suppliers. And once buyers introduced us to how they were auditing and filtering suppliers, we were able to determine our own pre-audit acronym and instrument, which you will see later on. So basically our value proposition for buyers was, we'll help you, number 1, find suppliers, number 2, filter them with this pre-audit, and then later on to organize supplier days. We had a case in which, for example, we had a buyer putting $250 million in purchasing, and we invited 25 suppliers. But this was a closed event. This was not an open or an advertised event. This was an event by invite only to those qualified suppliers. We were able to integrate purchasing pools, which you'll see later on. And later on, with those buyers, we selected key suppliers and we integrated supplier development programs. We'll discuss those things. The demand, and this is the most important thing, this is what you're seeing on the screen is the business opportunities that there are in Mexico. I'm not talking about 100% of the pools. This is just what buyers have shared with us. This demand that you're seeing on the screen comes from 45 tiers 1 OEMs, even tiers 2. And out of those $634 million, we've only signed 37, which means there's a huge opportunity for qualified suppliers. If you provide any of those capabilities and you're interested in pursuing these business opportunities, this is where you can come in. I'm just going to outline a few of them. For example, we have the castings on aluminum and magnesium. We don't have any of those suppliers. We have only one supplier in Mexico, but they're at 100% capacity. So that means they cannot take on any new business. CNC machining, sheet metal, forgings, we only have one Aerospace certified supplier in Mexico. The rest are not certified. So once again, about 95% of what you're seeing on the screen has not been fulfilled yet, which means it's a very interesting business opportunity for you. Which is, this is the way we've been working this. Number 1, we specificate the package conditions. This comes from the buyer. Then we're going to try to identify and sign an NDA with the supplier. Then we perform the 3PQTS audit. We'll see later on what that is. Out of this, we pre-select suppliers, and then we start the RFQ process. And after we've done the audit and the RFQ, those competitive suppliers basically go through an acceleration plan to get ready, and that's when the buyer comes in to do the final audit. So this is basically the way we've been working for the past almost 3 years. And what you're seeing on the right side of the screen basically is the 13 areas in which we've been able to detect gaps and in which we determine the supplier development program. So basically this is the model in which we've been working for the past 2 years now. The sequence that we've done, as I said before, we went first to the buyers. We identified 210 buyers, as you're seeing on the screen right now, out of which we were able to present this value proposition to 70. Out of those 70, 45 said yes, which is the $634 million you're seeing on the screen, and we discussed before. And the other 25 actually said, we cannot join the program because we already have a supply chain team. However, whenever you have the inventory of capabilities of companies interested in catering the aerospace market in Mexico, let us have access to those capabilities and we'll contact them. So that doesn't mean that only the 45 were interested. The 70 buyers were interested, but only 45 were able to share some of the needs that they had with us. Then we started our search. We initially went over 360 suppliers. We visited them with another organization. And basically what we were able to do is to determine the maturity levels, which I'm going to share later with you. When I explained before that we help buyers find suppliers, you're seeing on the screen one of the success stories that we had. We had a buyer from the UK, and he approached the government at that point, and he said, I'm looking for plastic injection molding suppliers in Mexico. He got a database of about 320 suppliers, but just like a directory, just the name of the company and contact data. It didn't have any capabilities, it didn't have any available capacity, it didn't have any certification levels, and nothing. So he got referred to us, we signed an NDA, he disclosed specifications, and basically we delivered actually a list of 20 suppliers rated from top to bottom. And basically this allowed the buyer to visit the top 5, out of which he selected the top 3, and he awarded $14 million in less than 6 months. This could have taken 18 to 24 months, and it took only 6 months with a 60% in savings. So it was a very interesting success story for them. Basically, we go to the audit when a supplier gets pre-qualified. Basically, that's when we start the connection process. We start the introduction. And later on, as I said, we organized the supplier days. We were able to host 7 supplier days, out of which 32 supplier development plans were triggered. As you're seeing on the screen, $37 million have been signed with 15 suppliers, and hopefully we have more contracts coming on, especially if you decide to jump on board on the upcoming commercial missions that are going to be organized in the upcoming months. These are the maturity levels we were able to determine, and this was especially because we said we visited more than 360 suppliers. Why are we not signing more contracts? Why only 15? And basically, we started to learn that with the pre-audit that we made, there were 5 different levels of maturity, and that's what you're seeing on the screen. Usually, a supplier that could be awarded a contract goes from a platinum and titanium levels. So this is where the opportunity comes for you. There's a lot of very mature companies outside of Mexico that have not been able to join this aerospace trend in the country. So let's see what this opportunity looks like. This table that you're seeing on the screen, focus on the right side after the non-visited, the blue side. If you see, we have the bronze, silver, gold, platinum, and titanium levels, and we have 17 categories of suppliers. That's the supply base that we've already assessed and pre-audited. And if you see platinum levels, we have only 8, and titanium, we have nothing. This means there's a very good opportunity. If you happen to be platinum or titanium, there's a very good opportunity that you can pursue, and we need to connect you with those buyers. The 3PQTS basically is an acronym of our pre-audit. And basically it stands for profile. We talk about the company profile. Obviously, every buyer wants to know who they're dealing with. And this is a very brief outline of what your marketing and sales presentations should look like, your websites. The second piece stands for people, your people profile, where basically they're trying to determine the skills that your personnel has. The third piece starts for pricing, which is basically commercial terms. Then we go for the Q of quality, T for technology, which is the inventory of machinery and equipment, and the supply chain integration. Basically, this is all the information that buyers want to know about suppliers before they even get connected with them. Usually what happens is that a buyer says, find me CNC machining suppliers, and when we send them their presentations, this is what they're trying to find. Let me show you one screen that shows how it looks. What you're seeing on the screen right now, it's the different columns segregated. The first one stands for the first P, which is the company profile. This shows 60 companies. Every line happens to be one company. This view, as you can see, it has 4 different elements. The green stands for the information's there. We're not questioning the quality of the information. We're just seeing if the information's there. So, once again, the green shade shows that the information's there. The yellow, it shows that it's in plan or in progress. Let's suppose that this supplier doesn't have a AS9100 or NADCAP certification, but it's already in the process, so it'd be yellow. The red, obviously, the information's not there, and the white, obviously, it does not apply. What you can see on the screen basically is how buyers see suppliers when we send them their presentations, and they're trying to look for key information. So most of the marketing and sales presentations that we get from different suppliers, even foreign companies, do not qualify exactly for what the buyer is looking for. I'm going to give you one example. We had a case of a tier 1, and he said, find us suppliers who can do brackets and valves. So we segregated a list. We integrated 15 suppliers. And when we recommended them, they started scratching out suppliers' names from the list. And we asked, why are you scratching them out? And one of the buyers said, because we already saw their website and they do not do what we are needing right now. And we said, we already visited that facility and they actually do it. So this conversation basically rescued this supplier and it got it into the RFQ process. But if we hadn't had that conversation, basically this supplier wouldn't be there. What I'm trying to say over here is, I'm going to go back one slide. It's very important that before we introduce you to the buyer, that we have all the information the buyers are looking for, so that when the buyer sees your presentation, they don't see you like one of these lines that I'm showing on the screen. So basically be working together to make sure that you are outlining all the presentation, all the items of information that the buyers are looking for. These are the different 4 stages, and this would be what we're going to be working with you, and especially making sure that you have the right information. Stage number 1, in order to get connected, basically it'd be the combination of the 3 M's. The 3 M's is the right market, and by the right market, we mean the qualified buyer. We put together an acronym, which is a BANT, which stands for a buyer that has a budget. The A stands for authority to make decisions to buy. The N for the need. They need what you're selling and a time frame to make the decision. That's a qualified buyer. So basically, we could connect you to these qualified buyers, if and only if we have the right information, which is basically the 3PQTS acronym that we explained before. So if we make the right connection and we introduce you to our inventory of capabilities, then we can connect you with those buyers. And once you're connected, the first thing that's going to happen is that they're going to send you an NDA. Something that happened to us is that there were suppliers that it took them about 3 months to sign the NDA. So one of the buyers said, I'm going to show you what you are competing against when I send this RFQ to Asian suppliers. He said, if I send right now an NDA to a supplier in Asia, they sign the NDA in less than 48 hours. And 36 to 48 hours later, I have a quotation. And 2 weeks later, I have samples on my desk. That's what we are competing against. So number 1, it'd be connecting you with the supplier, with the buyer, and then signing the NDA so that you get access to drawings and everything you need for the RFQ. And then quoting, basically we could help you over here, especially on the supply chain integration. Something that kills the equation is the logistics jump. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's suppose that one of my buyers is trying to look for a machine part, but you're going to require welding and you're going to require anodizing. So basically, if you are going to outsource those processes, that could kill the cost competitive equation. So what we would try to help you with over here, let's suppose that you want to bid for this process, what we'll do is we will connect you with other complementary suppliers so that you can start doing something over here and make a competitive quotation. And this goes outside of your core capabilities. So that's why in the bottom it says consulting and connection. Basically, will help you along the process. Stage number 3 would be getting you through the FIAs and PPAPs processes. And basically over here, it'd be trying to help you to monitor those KPIs and see how we can help you even with government incentives. There was one case in which, for example, we're able to negotiate for an incentive of 70% of the cost of the tooling for this specific process, especially because they were about to sign an LTA. And once an LTA is signed, basically what we can try to help you with is to integrate those improvement plans. Usually buyers tiers 1 are going to be asking you for a 5% improvement in cost on an annual basis. So how do you do that? The first year, perhaps second year is going to be easy, but later on it's going to be very complicated for you, and that's where we can come in. So those are the 4 stages through which we can walk you through the getting integrated in the aerospace value chains in Mexico. Some of our success stories, as I said before, 14 suppliers. We've already signed 15 contracts, out of which 14 have been SMEs from Mexico. That's what we had signed. There are some more potential supplier integrations. These are potential contracts. We're in the process of getting these suppliers connected. And so the key question over here would be, how do we get you in? How do we put you in that screen where it says success stories? How do we connect you with this buyer and walk along with you? So here is where we show you how do we start. Number 1, send us your company presentation. It'd be trying to include as much information as possible of the 3PQTS acronym that I shared before. Then obviously, since we have NDAs with our buyers, we cannot disclose the name of the companies or the name of our buyers. So what we'll do is, once we get the presentation, we'll send it to our buyers, and if they agree, then we'll make the introduction. There's a lot of times in which they ask us to have an NDA between FEMIA and the supplier. And if we already have this NDA and we have an NDA with the buyer, they say release the RFQ, release information, but that's only once we get approved by the buyer. Then if the buyer approves it, basically what we'll start to do is to make the connection. It could either be a conference call, it could be through email, it could be a commercial mission. I don't know, it could be different ways of getting you connected with the right buyer, but it'd be a precision shot. I mean, we're not taking you to a commercial mission like a discover mission. This would be getting you connected with the bond buyers that we explained before. So, and afterwards we'll follow up to see what types of assistance you will be requiring along the way. So basically, these are the business opportunities and the way to get connected with these buyers. I'm going to share my contact data here. You have my number, my email, and would be very, very interested in learning about your capabilities and learning about especially the type of business opportunity you'd be interested in pursuing. So Martha, I wonder if we have any questions at this point.
Thank you very much, Javier. Let's see if we have some questions. There's one question for you. Is it possible to manufacture in Austria to supply for aerospace operations here in Mexico?
Well, that's a very common question that we get, especially since a lot of suppliers happen to have their capabilities in other countries. It is very important to understand that the buyer is trying to locate cost-competitive suppliers in Mexico. So it might be acceptable at first, but in the end, they're going to ask you to relocate or expand your operation over here in Mexico. And obviously, we'd be glad to help you all the way. But it is very important to understand, if we take you to these buyers are trying to look for cost-competitive solutions in Mexico. So just at the beginning, they will accept that you manufacture parts or process parts in Austria, but then later on, no later than 2 years, you're going to be required to establish an operation here.
So I have another question for you. How exactly can we connect it? Can we be connected with aerospace buyers in Mexico?
Well, as I explained before, I think it'd be very important for those of you who are interested in getting connected. It'd be to understand what type of capabilities you'd be interested in offering to the buyers. since you're going to have access to this presentation, it'd be very important to see not everything, but the capabilities that you qualify for. If you're good in CNC machining, if you're good in castings, if you're good in forgings, it'd be very interesting to learn about the capabilities that you have. Think about the capabilities that you might be willing to expand in Mexico or to integrate. And then once you're clear on that, and especially type of applications, it's very different talking about aircraft interiors than engines and landing gear. So what type of applications would you be willing to pursue? And once you have that information clear, contact us, and together, Martha and ourselves will help you to organize a commercial mission to get connected with this specific buyer. So obviously, as explained before, we need to see your presentation. You'll get assistance from our side to review your presentation to see if it has all the information buyers are looking for, because otherwise you're going to get disqualified before you even come to Mexico. So send us your presentation, we'll review it, and then we'll coordinate the B2B meeting, whether it is through a commercial mission or perhaps at a show or perhaps even visiting the facility of the buyer in Mexico.
Since Javier mentioned it already, a heads up. We are planning an economic mission together with the FEMIA at the beginning of 2020. If you are interested in coming to Mexico before, we are always happy to organize a personalized visit for you. Just let us know if you have any interest. So for now, thank you very much for listening. I will give the word once again to Javier.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Once again, we have about 95% of the purchasing pools that we just talked about today very open for qualified suppliers that are willing to go for it. So would be very interested in learning about your capabilities and learning about when you would be coming to Mexico to see how we pursue together those opportunities. And once again, so thank you for joining us today. You have our contact data, and we expect to see you soon.
And now for me just is to say thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, please contact us. Goodbye.
Goodbye.